Hello, it's September 25th, 2016, and this is World War III This Week. I'm Tony Smario from my father, BroSal.org YouTube channel. And I want to make a point over and over now, for new people that might be listening, that the time is not yet. This is all being presented to us to plant the seeds for the future. I think we have to question a lot of what this next war will be like and when it will be. Because I think they are happy for us to go with what is popular. And if you do a little homework at all, you'll see the popular view is almost always wrong because it's almost always the propagandized view. And if you consider how far they've come from something that was a big influence on the Nazi movement in convincing the German people that the answer was in this xenophobia, that they had to rid their country of everyone and that the Jews had done this to them and that they needed to put these people in camps, work them to death. All of that was to a sad purpose when you look at the history. That wasn't accidental. And so all this media propaganda that allowed Hitler to do what he did is what I find, how can you ignore the strength of it? How can you ignore the examples that we've been shown over time through, George Orwell, 1984, which I've seen people present that when he first wrote it, it was meant to be titled like the next year. He wrote it in 48 and it was supposed to be 1949 or something. He was trying to point out this is where they're at, what they're trying to do. This is the future they envision. And when it came to America, they retitled it 1984. I don't know if there's truth to that, but there's certainly something to the vision that was already understood at the time. And so I would say that in our day and age and our technology, you got to be very careful not to be taken by the vision that's obviously being propagandized. You have to show, where else are you going to get your information? Because it's like you get the information from the Matrix. How do you use that to see through the Matrix? And I don't know, but that's essentially what we're trying to do, I think. And I point out it comes from standing far back enough to get a perspective on history, especially the last 100 years since the formation of the Federal Reserve System, the establishment of Palestine, or at least the declaration in the concerning the state of Palestine, the Balfour Declaration, and the establishment, the Bolshevik Revolution that results in communism, and then, marching forward into the revolution in China, and all these things, we know the Bolshevik Revolution wasn't organic. We know the banking system wasn't organic. We know the push for Palestine wasn't organic. Man, the push for Palestine was part of what World War II was all about, if not World War I, but certainly World War II. World War I, they had to get the Ottomans out of there. But World War II, clearly, when you look at the funding, look who's involved, look at the result. And remember, that was all set up. Long before, right after World War I, they were making the conditions such for Germany through such harsh restrictions brought on by the treaty that they had to sign after World War I, that the people who put the conditions in place, which, just turn out to be the world bankers, they had all the pressure points in place so that Germany couldn't do anything but, take the money. Let's talk about where Hitler got the money. The Harrimans and the Bushes and the Ford Motor Company supplying the trucks and Standard Rockefeller supplying the oil. These guys were all getting rich on the free labor out of Germany. And so, when you stand back a little bit, who's planning all this? And look at the reflection if we're coming into a great war. What's the propaganda going on now, 60, 70, almost 80 years later? They were propagandizing in the 20s, so, by the 30s, you're talking almost 80 years ago. What are they doing now to lead us to if this was what we got coming as this great war? And so I say you got to look at it as all the seeds are being planted. The seeds of dissension, the seeds of, and the question I want to bring up, or the point that occurs to me, is that not being able to believe in the media as giving me the truth, I have to wonder, and understanding the wag the dog nature and their ability to wag the dog. Show you a war on TV, and you believe it. Show you some, ISIS chopping heads off on TV, and we're ready to go kill Muslims over ISIS. I'll talk more about that later, but, I'm trying to get at the bottom of how much is the deception, and if we know a war is coming, they are pushing us to a war, but how much is really going on right now? I'm seeing all this American mania. I mean, it's pure circus, isn't it? All the, the election mania, the gender mania, the terrorism mania, all these things that just have Americans, vaccinations, Zika virus, right? And so I want to talk about for a second standing back far enough to be able to look at the world in some perspective. And the reason it's important, today we have this terrorism. Arab terrorism is driving, all of our problems, from the refugees to all these terrorist acts around the world. That's what we believe. That's what our media is reporting. Arab terrorism. But when you look at, what is Arab terrorism? Where did that come from? How long's that been in the world, and where did it come from? It's not a Muslim thing any more than these, Christians that hate everybody and want to kill everybody that doesn't believe in Jesus is a Christian thing. Is that what Jesus said? He said, love your enemy, right? If he hits you, turn the other cheek. Bless those who curse you. So it's impossible for me to reconcile Christianity with these haters that want to feel justified killing people in God's name. Well, same thing on the Muslim side, but how'd that get started? Our modern terrorism threatening, look at the world in the last 15 years since 9/11. None of this was going on like this, right? When did all this happen? And what is the real cause of all of this world that we're in? You're telling me first of all, 9/11 is so clear. There was no Arab terrorists. All the guys we pinned it on, we admit are still alive somewhere. So the whole thing is just a big wag the dog without getting into, all the 9/11 discrepancy. Let's just say Arab terrorism is one of the last conspiracy theories that fly. Bunch of Arabs hijacked planes, flew them into buildings. That probably didn't happen. Many other things might have happened, but doesn't look like that happened. And as I said at the time, geez, big play, huh? They're able to do that, but nothing else in America. Nothing. Till what? San Bernardino, 15 years later? This is our big Arab terrorism in America after 9/11. So then you go behind 9/11. What was that? You got Arafat, which I've seen plenty of stuff now on that little, CIA planted weasel. You got plenty of connections there why Arafat was never rubbed out. He was keeping the game going. Remember, think Cold War. Think Hitler. They raised up Hitler. They paid for him. They created the circumstances in Germany so that only some drastic thing like that could possibly help them. And then they funded the drastic thing that came along, if not chose it. I don't know whether Hitler's original push for politics had anything to do with a connection to CIA, but certainly we then funded this maniac and provided, if not, helped him with instruction. Here's what we think you ought to do with those people. Here's what we think you ought to do. Yeah, we think you should attack. I don't know. All I know is it was obviously he was played. And they've been, I say, ever since the Cold War, they've been setting up conditions for the next great war. And that's why people who think Russia is an honest adversary just don't understand the game. They're only an honest adversary in the fact that, they're the ones with the guns that are going to be pointed at the other side, which if you're an American or a Western European, probably, at least from England or, any of these countries, they're going to be Russian weapons pointed at you. But funny enough, the funding's gone on by the same people all along. There's only one Bank of International Settlements. There's only one International Monetary Fund. You can see where they've spread their money around and what it's done to the world. And so it seems as if Russia, China, Iran have been set up from the very beginning, along with some smaller satellite countries. Looks like Pakistan going to join that group, along with Syria, the Shia Muslims. Perhaps Turkey will, as I've always been saying, we don't know which way Turkey's going to go yet. But they're all part of the same group that's having their strings pulled through the same money for a long time. There's no doubt about that when you consider how Russia's managed to rearm so quickly and become this threat. And, again, there's many elements. I'm trying to keep a coherent narrative here. And the idea is to stand back far enough and see that if they're setting up World War III, like they set up World War II after World War I through Hitler, like they used Al-Qaeda, right? That seems to be where we got where the beginning of ISIS, how we were going to eventually have a radical Islamic, draw from that part of the world to create our proxy army, ISIS. And to do that, we needed to build on the radicalization that's been going on since Wahhabism was introduced by the English at the same time they were screwing the Hashemites 100 years ago. So you have to build on that. And of course, they've been doing that all along through their covert operations, the Muslim Brotherhood and other things. So Al-Qaeda, I've seen stuff about the 72 Olympics and the killing of those Israeli athletes, because that paved the way for an establishment of an international terrorist arm of, I don't know if it was NATO or who, I think it was NATO, which is, of course, still in force today. So it allowed them to do all sorts of things under the guise of a bureaucracy. So anyway, this is the way I'm seeing the world. It comes all the way from 100 years ago, right on up through 9/11, right on up through the Arab Spring, right on up through all this BS modern, Arab terrorism, which if it wasn't funded, it wouldn't be going on, right? It's like if the Christians didn't have all these friggin' guns, they wouldn't be killing people either. It's kind of absurd, don't you think, the way... Well, I want to mention it in this way, you guys. Here's what I think is important right now. If you stand back far enough, you can see maybe a goal to it all. That if you were the people that came down through time with the money, and your whole idea is either that, I don't know, you're either talking to spirits who are pushing you, in which case it's some sort of like, it's like a demonic world that many religious people imagine, that there's, evil spirits behind it all. But since they don't just show up like Iron Man and have their way, we got to think, how do they do it? Apparently they influence some people. Now, when I look at how that influence comes down in the visible realm of the world, it's certainly money. Money makes the world go round, not spirit. Not anymore. Not to very many people. Money makes the world go round. Think how far you have to go from any civilization to get to where your money isn't valuable, especially if it's an American dollar. Think of the tribe you have to find in the middle of nowhere that has nowhere to spend that dollar. That's pretty remote. So that's how valuable money is. It's the measure of everything in this world. It's the measure of, it's become the measure of happiness for a very diluted generation and time in history. It's the measure of almost everything. And so money having this value in the world, you can see how these other countries all around the world are being divided. And they're pushed, I think, through money ties mostly. And you look at how our Congress, is talked about as the best Congress money can buy. That's how it's done. It's done through lobbying. It's done through money. It's done through promise of position. You do this, and when you get out, you're going to be a VP over at my, you're going to be on the board of directors over at my oil company, over at my construction company, over at my defense contractor, over at my pharmaceutical company, and you're set for life. And all you got to do is, help, push this bill through now while you're in Congress. And so everybody, it's so common knowledge. They make movies about it. It's not even like a conspiracy theory. It's just the way things are. And so if you imagine that kind of money being used all over the world in all the places where the power structure is, the structure, I should say, the administrative structure of power, what we call government, the people that tell us what to do, that pay the police to tell you can't go there, that's a national park. You can't have a fire there, that's a national beach. You can't drink in the street, that's a national law. You have to vaccinate your children, whatever. The government. The administrators are paid by somebody, you guys, all over the world. And those somebodies, are consistently tied to these multinational corporations that are the richest, the oil companies, right? The people that build pipelines through your country. So all that influence going on divides the world depending on where that original division is. And that's what I say, where you get this Russia and China, why they had to be separated out from 100 years ago, 80 years ago. They had to be that's what the Cold War was all about. You had to get a certain number of countries, on the tit of Russia or China, for the most part, so that they could be an antithesis to this thesis on the other side that we're all going to be on the tit of the Western banks, the central banks of the West, as established in society. Because, of course, China and Russia and these other countries, Syria, Libya, up until we took them out, Iraq, they weren't on our central banking system. But I say that must be all part of the play toward the end, if you consider this predictive world war that somehow the Zionists and Muslims are going to be made to fight in this final war. So somebody's had their finger on the trigger, is what I'm trying to say, and how we can read the world as building to something, not reacting all the time. Reacting, oh, China's building in the South China Sea. Oh my God, what do we do? Oh, Zika virus outbreak. What do we do? Oh, terrorism. I mean, I'll talk about a little in a couple of these articles I have for you guys this week, but that's just not how it really works. They tell us technology is, maybe 50 years ahead, at least 20 years ahead. It's not really hard to trace the money back a couple of hundred years so that you can see you're dealing with some sort of congruity in the money and in how and when Russia got affected with it and who. So what I want to point out is that all this terrorism that's going on is part of like the Cold War, only it's more hot. We're coming hot. Wars and rumors of wars, if that's a correct way to see it. But I don't think we're coming to this great Third World War. And I question, the more I see evidence of different technologies, I mean, what do they need nuclear weapons for? How many nuclear weapons have ever even gone off? And how do we know that what these rockets carry are nuclear weapons? Do they need those? With the stuff they've got nowadays, they can turn those buildings to dust. They've got weapons that just affect your ears. All sorts of chemical weapons that can do any number of things. They can make weather. They can even make, what would look like meteorites, from what I've seen, these plasma balls come and hit the earth like meteors or hit the ocean and create perhaps tidal waves or certainly some sort of local disruptions. Do they need to blow off nuclear weapons? So I want to talk about, what I think are the three main goals you got to keep in mind, which is depopulation, new temple, rule the world. That's what they're trying to do. And that's why they're going on this temple through the Jews to do it, because they're the ones that have this prophecy about they're eventually going to rule the world and there will be nobody else that takes over from them. So if they can make that happen, you have a justifiable reason to keep everyone down forever. And so it's under that guise, it would appear. I mean, if you're going to look at like who runs the world, why is it all these high-ranking Masons? Why do they all come from these secret societies? Mostly through Catholicism, which connects us to that old world money and the old world connections. Not all the Catholics were against the Knights Templar, obviously. They got helped out of many places. They set up the banking then in England and the Netherlands in the 1600s. So, this connection that goes all the way back to Jerusalem and the temple is an odd one that I don't hear many people tackle, especially Jonathan Cahn, the great, financial disaster prophet. He was wrong last year, by the way, and we were right over here, just in case anyone's keeping track. And I'll tell you, it's not going to be a financial disaster this year either. Not the one everybody's worried about. That's why they talk about it so much. That's what you got to learn if you're going to learn anything. Or that's what I've learned, is that the more they talk about it, the more it becomes obvious. The more you've got to try and place it in a, what does it mean? And so in the case of all of this terrorism, it obviously isn't real. I mean, since 9/11, if these Arab terrorists had the sophistication to pull that off then, that's it? They can't do anything else? Can't blow up a bridge or a school for real? All these hoaxes? All this, come on. Where's the sort of terrorism that even comes close to representing in the way that represented? So I think we have to suspect a lot of this stuff since we know 9/11 was an inside job, a lot of this stuff they're showing us is to move us along a path, like the Cold War. They need to create a certain group that are our enemies and a certain group that are our friends, that we must protect at all costs, like Israel, for instance. So, I mean, I think you have to see the news that way, which I tell you, it's very difficult. That's why I'm spending a little time today. I'm trying to go a little slower, because I think I lose a lot of people because I rush through so many issues. But as I say, whatever level the people behind the scenes, and we've covered a lot of that in our studies. I mean, there's tremendous amount of evidence that they're pedophiles, that they sacrifice people, they drink blood. I mean, I don't know. They raise demons. There's a lot of evidence. Is all that evidence planted as a red herring? I'm still not totally sure. I'm just going to say there is a lot of evidence. And it's not talked about a lot. So it's, I'm still a little on the fence. It's only things like Enoch, the book of Enoch that we study, and other occult, understandings in which, demons are real, and demons can be raised, and demons can be helpful or hurtful, depending on your perspective with them and how you deal with them. So there seems to be too much evidence to ignore that it's possible. Are the people behind the scenes that govern the world, are they being fooled by demons into thinking it's all material? Or are they communing with demons to run the show? That's a tough one to answer, I think. With all my study, I still would say it's a tricky one and feels like one of them trick questions where it looks easier than it is. But on the human level of what we see and what moves everybody, it's money, man. Mammon. You can't serve both God and mammon. And so it's mammon. It's that worship of money, the thing that makes the world go round. So that's what's moving everyone on the human level. And so I say the reason you see these countries posturing the way they are, if that's not just a show through our media, if that's really going on. For instance, it looks like in Afghanistan, we've been rooting out and killing the native culture there for 15 years. It looks like it's really going on. But in other ordeals like North Korea, did he really blow up a nuclear weapon, or they just show us footage of a test that's been done in the past, and then, they put any heading they want? I mean, that's so easy. If you don't, there's been a lot of alt media that's presented the evidence of how news is put together. And not only that, it's scripted. I saw something just this past week or so. Somebody put together a neat little section where it had 3 or 4 different lines, silly lines, really silly things, not even important news items, but silly news items, where everybody in all these stations all over the country repeated the line exactly. So you can tell they all got a script. This is a filler. This is the way you're to say it. And it comes up on your teleprompter and you say it. And so, that's well demonstrated, how the news is pretty much put together like a television show. And so understanding that, come on, think about it, between the money being the thing that moves everybody and the media and the manipulation of everything we see or hear, you have to think of some filter when you're thinking of the times we're in and the news you're watching and what it's getting you to do. So the goal, I think, is depopulation, because there are too many religious people, which is who they seem to hate the most. And so whether they're demon worshipers or materialists, they have every reason to hate Christians, especially, and Muslims, and Orthodox Jews, who aren't into this Zionism either. Those are the three groups of people. And while the world's happy to talk about the 6 million Jews that were killed in the Holocaust, even though it's becoming harder and harder to justify that in educated circles. It seems people who know that that's an inflated number, and that even the stories of the gassing and all this were things that, well, I'm not clear, and I've hurt Jewish friends' feelings before, so I don't want to do that. I don't know what's true. I'm just saying there is a huge educated group of people pointing out that the Holocaust figures have been inflated from the very beginning, all to a purpose. It was always meant to be part of the propaganda, because they were trying to scare the hell out of Jews to get them out of Europe and get them over to this Palestine. And so that was part of the propaganda, was inflating how many Jews were killed and how torturous. And so whether it's 6 million or not, apparently some 30 million Christians is the number. You know, I bring up the Ukrainian Holocaust of about 10 million that took place in just a short period of time. But apparently the whole thing against Christians amounts to some 30 million Christians slaughtered over the last 100 years. You talk about population increase? How's that even possible? As fast as they're slaughtering people. So that leads me to my second point, right? I guess I jumped a little there from the depopulation being so important to them. Too many people, and too many of the wrong people. These religious people that might not stand for a new temple being built in Jerusalem and claiming a Messiah that's not Jesus. Remember, both the Christians and the Muslims are waiting for Jesus to be the Messiah in the temple in Jerusalem eventually. And so I think that's why the culling has to take place first before they can build a temple, and the war is part of the culling. All of this is it's already going on. It's already started, but I believe this is a much longer process. It's why people think it's just, it's okay, it's going to be okay, because they're just going to, boom, there's going to be some great war like tomorrow out of the closet. And no, I don't think so. I think that's why Jesus said, don't be alarmed. Even though nation rises against nation, earthquakes, famines, pestilences in diverse places, but don't be alarmed at that, because the end is not yet. So that indicates to me that when we see all these initial signs, that they're going to be a prolonged period. Nostradamus sees a 25-year war. So all of that's starting to come to light. In fact, I did a little thing on Nostradamus last year, I think, in our biblical insights, and I kind of want to go back to him because he's seeming more and more relevant with the financial collapse that he sees, the earthquakes and the great destruction that he sees, and I keep saying I see natural disasters as the ultimate depopulation tool rather than nuclear weapons. That's just and the reason I get that insight is because the means to these goals of depopulation, a new temple, and world rule, the means that have been going on the last 100 years and more, is deception, which brings us to our eschatological viewpoint, of course. Deception, if this is a spiritual thing, the great deceiver. And through lies, he'll destroy many, right? Isn't that what Daniel says? Through deception, he'll destroy many. So, what's the deception? Alien deception? Is that what's coming? Miracles with their new technology that nobody's seen and knows about. We've only got a little taste so that we can see the difference. or notice the difference when something more grand will be like blown away and think, whoa, what we have is nothing like that. What is the great deception? But look at, what's bubbling to the surface in our day. NASA being a great deceiver all the way from the beginning. Look who was involved with NASA. Look who started, was there at the Jet Propulsion's laboratory in the beginning, but Werner von Braun, one of the chief Nazi scientists, when we brought, 1,500 Nazi scientists over to essentially be the workers in our dark government behind the scenes to do the science, to keep doing what we were funding them to do in Germany, to start doing it here. But you think about NASA and, what certainly looks to be a hoax about walking on the moon. I mean, I've seen a lot of debunked stuff now, and darn it, it's very hard to believe it, and the space station stuff, I'm still a little on the fence, but there's just so much evidence of deception. And wouldn't that be the means? Deception, because I've been saying for years, Dad, where's all the money coming from? The sophisticated military, NASA's going to space, all this surveillance equipment, they can read a matchbook, they can read every email of every person. How much does that stuff cost? Where are they getting the money in a failing economy where everything's being shipped over to China, Taiwan, India, where everything's made for a few dollars a day? Where are they getting the money? Americans aren't paying the taxes. The rich don't pay any taxes. Come on, you guys. Where's the money come from? They own the drugs. They don't report. The military, half of its budget doesn't even have to be reported, what they spend it on. I say we're being tricked. They're not spending it on all this crap you think they are. That's my guess. All this stuff they show you is all a show, because they've been spending it on other technologies to be able to turn buildings to dust like they did in 9/11. They've been working on technologies that perhaps account for this Mandela effect. But I say that's their future. Neutron bombs, biological bombs, I don't know. The Cold War was BS. Everybody knows it. So we weren't spending all that money building all those weapons, and neither were they. Are we really digging caves? Have they really got caves, or is that all deception? If they do, damn, that's a lot of money. Got to take in a lot of workers. I never met anybody talked about working on a cave, or it's even been in a cave. But the alt media presents it like it's reality. I don't know. Is that a deception too? So, to fool us into, nuclear war, so that when they throw plasma things down here or there, they can say ISIS blew up a nuclear weapon, China blew up a nuclear weapon, North Korea blew up a nuclear weapon. Now we got to obliterate them with all our sophisticated stuff. So that's coming, because the plan is obliteration of a lot of people. And I say that's what they've been really working on, the technology and the cover story. How are we going to get people to believe? Because that's what, look back. It's what they did with Nazis. It's what they did with the Cold War. What makes you think this is organic and real? Arab terrorists. No, they've been funding, Arab terrorism for 100 years. So yes, there's Arab terrorism, but it's only because the money's going to them. Stop the money, stop the Arab terrorists. That fast. Just like the Christian terrorists. Take away their guns and money. No more Christian terrorists. They'll have to go back to just being hypocrites on the street, judging their neighbors instead of loving their neighbors. So I'm saying it's money that's moving everybody, and all these countries, the pressure to this pipeline, this banking system, that banking system, that all gives everybody in it a real reason to fight. There's something to fight about, and it's all based on money. So I find that what we're coming to, I'm going to bring up a few articles, and I also want to talk about some of this other stuff that we're moving toward, but I think I mentioned it this week in the trending with all the extreme weather, but North Korea says floods worst disaster since World War II. So that's, there's a lot of weird weather going on. Tunisia, funny enough, is in its worst drought ever, and they're the largest olive producer in the area, more olive oil, I guess, than Italy and Spain. And their farmers are dying in Tunisia. So that's, again, is that being controlled? I don't doubt it, because that's where pressure really comes from. That's way more pressure than you can apply by hiring mercenaries or even in dropping biological bombs on people. You might get caught at that. But causing droughts, or, if that's the case, I'm still open. I'm not one of these people who imagine that every conspiracy must be true. And yet I follow all this stuff enough to know they're spraying stuff in the sky for some reason. I've imagined it might be so they can put on their light shows and do their holographs in the sky when the time comes, but I don't know. There's a lot of evidence it's got to do with weather patterns and breaking up storms and call. We know the patents all call for being able to cause rain. We know they can cause earthquakes. So anyway, I say these are the things we have to keep in mind. This is what I keep in mind when I read the news. I think, what evidence might I find over that was something we caused on purpose? Or does it just happen to be that, like always on the planet, the weather gets worse, the weather gets better, the weather gets worse, the weather gets better, the temperature goes up, the temperature goes down. That's always happening, and they just take advantage of it to fill another news slot. And that's entirely possible in my view. But a lot of these other things now, how the U.S. Navy wants to handle Iran's naval provocations in the Persian Gulf. And so, of course, Iran's naval provocations, we never admit that perhaps we're provoking Iran. They're provoking us, which naturally they would do in their little tiny boats against our big ships. This general or admiral that they talk to points out that our naval ability, our capacity is overwhelming. There's nothing Iran could do to us to take us out, and that we are ready and prepared. And our commanders in the area have full, green light to do what they got to do. They don't have to call it in to ask for permission. If they feel threatened, they can do whatever the protocols call for. So that's the status over there where he's saying. Anyway, that's what they want us to know, that it's guns hot in the Strait of Hormuz with the Iranian provocation. However, he pointed out we have seen an agreement with China in the South China Sea for some different protocols that help to facilitate the relieving of tensions like this so that it doesn't have to go hot. But he points out we don't have that with Iran. So unfortunate, I suppose, that we don't see that as an important point in our nuclear discussions with Iran. How easy this is all of a sudden to just provoke a war or even some sort of battle in the Strait of Hormuz. But anyway, he's pointing out that they're no match for us, but yet they keep provoking us, and that our commanders have the green light to do what they have to do. So that's how close they want us to know we are with Iran over there. It's that close to shooting each other. I mean, this is a world, I don't get it. We've been talking about peace most of my adult life in the Middle East. It's absolutely absurd that we can't do anything but provoke. with all our military capability, we can't do anything but provoke with it. We can't use it to pull back. We can't use it to create unity, right? We can't use it to. I mean, I suppose that whole argument. What are they good for except for war? What is it all good for? Why have we kept making more and better weaponry if what we've been talking about is peace all this time? Why hasn't every conversation been about how since we're already superior to Iran, why do they need to buy more weapons from Russia and we produce more to keep up with that? Why has that not been the focus? See, this is where I think you have to see the seeds of deeper intention. If the intention of the people that pull the strings was to make a world where they didn't have to go to war, where they didn't have to have all this tension and provocation, why wouldn't they have pushed a whole different direction? Well, it's pretty easy. The Iron Mountain Report, there's so many, think tank reports now on the idea that only war, only fear, which brings us to the alien thing, why they did the War of the Worlds fear in the days of radio with Orson Welles, and to test how does it work? Will people be freaked out of their mind, afraid, and do whatever we tell them? And so I think that that's what led to the whole Area 51 and the aliens, and the whole UFO mania came out of the idea that someday we can use this. Once technology's good enough, we can make people believe flying saucers have come and they shot somebody or they took somebody, or so it's all about the psychological understanding of knowing that keeping the people in fear is what keeps them predictable. As long as they're in fear, then they will follow you, being the leaders. And so that's why we've always been kept in fear, and we are today, even though the time is not yet. Even though I say what you see is everybody taking sides right now. They're getting the parity worked out. They're creating the smaller need for skirmishes, I think, before the Great War, which is going to happen because of the temple being rebuilt. So if they're going to kill anybody between now and the temple being rebuilt, then it's going to be in these, like they've been doing in Yemen, like they've been doing in Afghanistan. I mean, they're starving people in Venezuela, Philippines, places like that. Right? But I mean, in a more concentrated effort, they're going to have more hot spots like South Korea going after North Korea sort of thing. So will we see that before the temple's built? I don't know. That's the kind of stuff I'm waiting to watch flare up. How big will these little regional wars and rumors of wars get to where, people have to be sent? We were talking boots on the ground in Syria last year, right? And now nobody's talking about that. We got it all under control, right? ISIS is all under control, and now the new threat is ISIS terrorism around the world by cells, refugees, and other threats. But nobody's talking about the threat of ISIS expanding throughout the Middle East anymore. And I say that's a clue to our eschatological idea that it's getting closer. We're getting closer to the good caliphate coming out, which will be a false caliphate, but it'll be good compared to ISIS. The white horse of Revelation, and that's the one who has to make way for the rebuilding of the temple. And so all of that is getting closer. I think when we see the destruction of ISIS, something has to fill that vacuum, whether immediately or over time. Okay, let's see. I don't want to keep it too long. F-35 proved it can take Russian or Chinese airspace without firing a shot. So this was an article showing this F-35 with its stealth capabilities can fly amongst other aircraft or any sort of anything going on and mark out through this new technology it has a target, and that target can then be fired at from a land-based or ship-based or a missile coming from somewhere else. And they showed it's this M6 missile and 22-foot long missile. And it's funny how they talked about how effective this all is. And yet what it didn't tell me is what's the range of that missile in Russian or Chinese airspace. I mean, not unless we got a missile. I mean, if they shoot a missile right from under this plane, how's this plane going to get a missile coming from where? Over there in time. So anyway, I think a lot of it is popular mechanics BS to keep everybody fascinated on their little stuff. Who knows if it's even a real plane they're showing me or a model. I mean, I'm sure they have some of them, but I'm just very skeptical now of this wag the dog world. And what are they? They're not spending all this money for nothing. That's what I say. Money makes the world go round. They're spending the money to set stuff up. They're spending the money to fool the public. They're spending the money on all their deceptions. No doubt about that. But they're not wasting any money. Yeah, new Islamic propaganda piece that shows hanging U.S. spies from hooks and slaughtering them like sheep. I mean, and if you believe that, absolutely unbelievable. And this article ends with calling our attention to the Nice terror attack and the truck slaughtering the people, which has been demonstrated to be BS, just a hoax. So, but right now what you see, I think significant, the India-Pakistan conflict over Kashmir is dividing those two powers and also galvanizing their associations, India with the USA and Pakistan with Russia. At least that's what they're telling us. So that Pakistan maybe is on that group of Iran, Turkey, Russia, Syria, and China. So, and funny, China's building the largest telescope in the world right now. So do they think, war is coming imminently? Are they worried about bombs dropping on them? Yeah, that's the other odd thing in the world. To me, these guys getting together for their summits, their economic summits and all this stuff, as if, the whole world's at war. All their little proxy countries are killing each other. We're sending weapons, money, all that, and that's not, I don't know. That all reeks of show to me. When you're at war, look at the Second World War. Even though that was still a show, it was a show on a much deeper level. You really did have to convince these two sides of their enemy. And look at the depth each side went to separate themselves. How what kind of enemy the enemy was. To think that the Allied forces and the Nazi forces would all be sitting down to talk economic summits and such. It's just absurd. And yet in the world we have all these real divisions going on, and yet we just keep fueling them and funneling more weapons to them. We're not sitting down making those the chief concern. So I think that's pretty telling right now. That's where they're going with this, as I've been saying, escalation. But I think we need to keep our mind on the deception. NASA, military, the financial system, the media, right, is pure propaganda. All of our recreation is pure propaganda. Diseases, even from AIDS to Zika, is all quite suspicious. Not to some people, they're sure it's all been developed as weapons, but it's highly suspicious. So the whole medical industry, education has been shown to be but indoctrination. Even the justice and prison system is really just like a pyramid system for filling the prisons. soaking the taxpayer. So, keep an eye out for the deception. Think of the deception going on right now. Don't believe what you see and what you read. Have some deeper vision of what is going on. What's the goal of these people? How are they going about it? How'd they get us through into World War II from World War I, and from World War II into this Cold War that's become this war on terror? Both are just as fake. One is as fake as the other. What does that mean? Does that mean the buildup of nuclear weapons was all fake? Or was it the excuse to build up nuclear weapons? Does that mean all these wars and rumors of wars around the world are all fake? Or are these the necessary components in this next step? I say you have to look very closely. Nice didn't happen. The Pulse shooting didn't happen. These things are BS. The Boston bombing didn't happen. So, was there a coup in Turkey? I don't know. Or was that just to allow for them these measures they've taken since then to round up everybody and have, they're a NATO country and now nobody can say anything because they had a coup. Anyway, that's how things get done. We put the Shah on Iran in the 50s and then took them out because the people were really upset, the popular movement, so we picked who their next maniac would be, who their next leader would be, and we supported Khomeini. So we've had our fingers in all the pies for a very long time. And we do things through deception. Even Israel's Mossad is through deceit. Thou will make war. So anyway, consider that stuff now. That's what I've got for you, World War III this week. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to you next week.